Hi everybody, this is Steve Cady, and I'm going to walk you through a presentation focused on change, strategies, principles, and tactics. What I'd like to emphasize here is this notion of what's the difference between strategies, principles, and tactics. And I think what's important is to notice that strategies focus on the end result, what you're trying to achieve when you go about changing. What does successful change look like for you? And so that's your strategy, what you're trying to achieve with change. Then when you move back one step, its principles are about the way you go about changing. In many ways, it's your style, it's your approach, and it's essentially your principles for how you go about changing. It's how you act and interact with others in the course of change to achieve those strategies, those outcomes. The tactics gets down to the tools and techniques and specific actions you will take using tools and techniques and timelines and other particular types of templates and documents and processes and so forth that you'll use. Those tools and techniques are the tactics that you'll use through your way, your principles, in order to achieve your results, the strategies. And so what I'm going to do is walk you through this and focus on a few things to help you kind of zero in on those core essential few things you need to do and incorporate into your change toolkit. So let's begin. As I mentioned, my name is Steve Cady, and I'm the founder of Nexus for Change. I'm also a professor of management and the director of the Doctorate in Organization Development and Change at Bowling Green State University. Our doctorate program and our master's program are leading programs in the country. Our master's program is the oldest in the world, and our doctorate program is new. It's in its third year. The average age of our students is in the 40s and 50s, and the experience ranges at 25 plus years. And they're working at mid to upper levels in all industries and all fields, from private and profit-oriented organizations and corporations to nonprofits and government. And so it's a wide range and highly diverse group, and we together are a laboratory for the best thinking and the best work and the best practices, evidence-based practices in change in our world. I'm really proud of them, proud of our program, and just excited to be able to continuously learn myself with them. So let's start with what is crazy. So crazy is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And if our world is changing so fast all the time, you might argue, well, hey, our world is no longer crazy because we're changing so much. But really, it's less about that we're going through a lot of change. It's really more about how we go about changing. So when you think of strategies, principles, and tactics, it's about those principles and tactics we use to achieve outcomes and what kind of strategies we choose. We've got to change our strategies, principles, and tactics focused on change in order to get different results, get better results in the changing environments we're in, whatever it might be, small projects, large change initiatives to small ones, to a meeting, a simple meeting. Now, the three core concepts I'd like to focus on that will help you think about how you want to add to your toolkit and enhance your approach to change is the change formula, collaborative change, and strategic planning canvas. Those are the three things I want to focus on with you here today. So in terms of the change formula, let's jump into that. It's been around forever. And some people would argue that, change happens to others. How do I get my child, spouse, partner, roommate to clean up after themselves? So it's like, how do I get someone to change their behaviors? How do I get them to behave differently? How do I get others? Second way of thinking about change is, how do I stop eating those potato chips that I keep eating all the time? Or how do I start exercising more? How do I stop smoking? How do I start, being more attentive and putting my phone down when my family and the people I love come to talk to me, and changing that addiction to technology and so forth? And how do I be more present to the people that I care about and love? So the change happens to others and to me. And the change formula is a really helpful formula to think through how might I go about managing that change experience that I have with others as I'm leading, managing, working with, directing, supervising others in a regular work environment to a particular project or a change initiative, all the way down to a meeting, a simple afternoon 1-hour meeting. And I can apply it to myself. So let's notice here, it's a multiplicative formula. D times V times F times S must be greater than R. I'm going to take you through each one of these. The key thing to notice is the multiplication. If any of these are missing, D, V, F, or S is missing, it cancels out that left side of the formula, and you are no longer able to move beyond the resistance to change. And I want to offer that resistance can be both helpful and healthy, what I would call productive, and it can also be counterproductive. And so the idea is to get that formula managed so that you're helping people move into a place of productive resistance so that you can help them move into a place of advancing the change. And all change starts in resistance. It's just a matter of whether it's productive or counterproductive. So let's start with the formula with D, dissatisfaction. Basically, you got to be dissatisfied with the current state, with where you are. That means if your thumbs are up, you are satisfied. Now, can you be happy with your level of satisfaction? Can you be dissatisfied? Can you be dissatisfied with your level of happiness? And can you be satisfied with your level of happiness? So what I want you to think about is this notion that happiness and satisfaction are two different concepts. Let me explain. There are people that are completely satisfied with their happiness. I'm happy and I'm satisfied. I am content. Then there are other people who are dissatisfied with their level of happiness. They're happy. They love the people they're around. They love their job. They love the project that they're working on. Everything's going great. However, they're dissatisfied with where they're at. Things could be better in our organization. Things could be better in our department. Yes, we're doing well. Yes, I like everybody. Yes, I love my work. I love working with you all. And we can do better. I got to be dissatisfied with that level of happiness. Sometimes people are unhappy and they need to be dissatisfied with that unhappiness, okay, to get into that first formula variable, D, to get that in a place to be ready to move and to change. So if you're satisfied, you're likely not going to change. If you're dissatisfied over here with your happiness or dissatisfied with your unhappiness, you are now ready for change. However, as you know, there are people that are completely satisfied with their unhappiness. You've seen it before, those people that are very happy, and even if you turn that frown upside down, the thumb goes down. People can be completely satisfied being miserable. So the key is you've got to be dissatisfied. Whether you're happy or unhappy, you've got to be dissatisfied with where you are. And now let's look at the next variable, this notion of a vision, an inspiration. People are drawn to their best self. They're drawn to something that is generative. They're drawn to something that is positive. They're drawn to what is possible. And so having an inspirational vision, an ennobling vision of what you yearn to become as a department, as a program, as a project, that it really sets the stage for moving forward. And what I want to focus on here is this notion of why an ennobling vision of the future. So in one study, a group of accountants were divided into two rooms, sitting in small groups. The rooms were divided, they're sitting in two rooms. On one side, the room was given the same issue. On the other side, they were given the same issue. However, they were given a different assignment. Same issue, two different assignments. On one side, They were assigned to solve the problem. On the other side, they were given the task of designing a future, an ennobling future. So what happened? Well, on the solving the problem side, as they watched the groups working at the tables, talking, they saw a lot of blame. Who's at fault? Band-aid solutions, and a serious drain of human energy. When they looked in the other room and they walked in and watched people, they saw people sitting up, a lot of energy, ownership. The solution was not a band-aid solution, a short-term quick fix. It was a long-term solution, and the enthusiasm and energy was just palpable in the room. So when we think about it, you get this dissatisfaction with the current state, which really is a desire to move, a desire to change. And you move that in with this ennobling vision that gets people inspired and energized about what they're trying to achieve. That's not enough. You've left meetings before with a lot of ideas, but no action, and it can deflate things very quickly. The next piece of the formula focuses on first steps. And what's important is this notion of committing publicly in the room to actions that will be taken in the short term, next week, next month. You have a meeting, don't leave without actions to be taken in the next week, the next month. You have a project, you got to get your first phase, you got to get working in the short term on concrete actions that are connected to that vision, that are moving beyond that dissatisfaction. Because once you have that dissatisfaction with the current state, you got to say, okay, great, we all agree, we're ready to move. Let's talk about the ennobling vision. Let's move quickly on that ennobling vision. Don't go into problem solving. Move into what's the opposite? What are we shooting for? As you're moving towards what you're shooting for, you then say, okay, we have this ennobling vision. Now let's get some concrete actions in place. That is then paired up with the next piece of the variable. Yeah, we got actions to take. Do we have in place the support, the champions from executive leadership and from other people in power who have influence over authority, processes, strategies, and resources, and tools, and what we need in order to successfully follow through the training and the other kinds of things that you need in support. If you think about support, think about it broadly in terms of people with power and influence, money and resources, tools and materials, staffing. Think of those kinds of things. And are those things in place to help you be successful? And so putting in place that will ensure that people are persevering in over the long term for a particular change. So resistance, as I mentioned, resistance is necessary. Every single change will start in a place of resistance. And so my invitation for you is not to frame resistance as bad, negative. What I would invite you to do is think of resistance as important information. And what I'd further invite you to do is to notice how resistance can be productive and counterproductive. Counterproductive resistance is where people are bad-mouthing, gossiping, stealing, damaging things, hiding information, hurting the process, hurting other people, bullying, picking on. And people do that. They do it covertly and overtly, passive-aggressively and aggressively. But you got people that are intentionally hurting others, the organization, and the change, withholding things, stealing things, changing things, talking badly about things in a way that is spreading rumors. Now, what is productive resistance? Productive resistance is asking questions, offering a suggestion. So ask questions, offer us suggestions. They're willing to try things out. They're willing to give it a try. They're willing to listen. They're willing to ask those tough questions. And productive resistance is quitting. It is okay for someone to say, I can't work on this project. I can't work in this change. I can't work here right now. And they leave it. That is not counterproductive. That is productive resistance. You're going to get all of that. And you allow for it. And you really listen as a manager, as a leader of change. You listen to that. Now, if you do that and you work on the DVFS, you're going to notice that the resistance is actually going to be impacted and start reducing. You're going to start using the resistance in order to shift the energy. Resistance will go down, the DVFS will go up, and eventually you'll see the formula shift such that people start moving into the other side of the behaviors of change, which they move from resistance to advancing the change. They move into a place of citizenship within the organization and the change. They move into a place of helping, showing up, participating, all the way to advocacy, championing, taking on responsibility, and helping out in ways that they don't have to. They're doing things in addition to, in terms of like they're walking in, they're taking an extra time to go talk to somebody, to encourage them to be a part of it, to help teach them something, to share with them, to lead on a task, whatever. You'll see the shifting move over. Now, what I want to share with you is summarize this in the course of a story. And there's an oil rig, and it's on fire. And everybody's been evacuated except for the main engineer. And there's a helicopter flying around. It's a true story. Helicopters flying around, reporters watching this like crazy situation. And this thing is high. If you jump off, you can die just hitting the water. There's sharks. It's cold. You could freeze to death within a few minutes. So you got all this stuff going on. And the person stands there. And at some point, he jumps. He lands. He survives. The reporter got to meet him and said, "Why did you jump?" And he said, "It got too hot." So this idea of dissatisfaction with the current state and moving sometimes is grounded in the fact that the unknown, the fear of the unknown, is compared to the fear of what you know. And sometimes the fear of what you know has got to be less than the fear of what you don't know has got to be less than the fear of what you know, right? Creating a burning platform, creating that case, that sense of urgency. So what you have here is you have a clear D. But he had to have more than that. When he looked down, okay, he saw the water. It was scary. It's unknown. What's going to happen next? He needed to also think about his family back home. He needed to think about living. He needed to think about the people he cared about. He needed to see the shore. He needed to know that there was something, that ennobling vision to go for. In addition, that there were boats. He saw that there were people there ready to rescue him as soon as he got off. So he had those first steps. He knew that he needed to jump, and he knew that he needed to be rescued. Boom. And then he needed to know that there was going to be things there to get him there. A boat that could get him to shore, get him away from the fire. So, this DVFS, when he saw all of that, he was able to then make that jump. And that's where the burning platform concept comes from. So D times V times F times S must be greater than R. And you've got to really jump sometimes into the unknown. And how do you help people do that on a change, whether it be a small change to a large one? Paying attention to the DVFS, thinking of the different variables and how you create engagement. That's where we're going to go here. And that's the notion of the tipping point. How do you get a whole bunch of people to move with you in the direction of change? In an organization and a community and all these different stakeholder groups, and you got all these different layers going on. And you got all these people, and each one of them has to have their own DVFS, greater than our experience personally. And then you got to connect it all together into that overarching DVFS collectively to get the group to move together in that direction. That's the art of collaborative change leadership. So let's talk about that, collaborative change. Collaborative change is about transformation. It's about a real change from the inside out. And when you think of the mode and delivery, think of this in terms of a caterpillar, because transformation means that the mode, okay, and delivery have dramatically changed. So if you think of mode and think of it as the delivery mechanism, how the caterpillar crawls, think about resources there and think about what the caterpillar eats. Now, think about this. Isn't this interesting? That the caterpillar crawls and eats leaves. The butterfly flies and eats nectar, pollen. Now think about this interesting thing. In that chrysalis, it is transformed into a mucky goo, and then it comes out. And the science will tell you that the DNA is still the same. Think of your organization. Are you changing in the way you do the work and who your customer is, where your resources and money come from, who provides what you need to run as an organization as a resource? Is that changing? Is the customer dramatically changing? And are the way you deliver your services changing dramatically? And are you going to look very different, yet at your core be the same? Transformation is about making that big of a shift. It's not an incremental change. It is a big shift, just like the caterpillar into the butterfly. In that shift, as you move in the direction of a DVFS, as you make that transformational shift, I like what Simon Sinek said, is that it's better to go slow in the right direction than to go fast in the wrong direction. But how do you get everybody moving in the right direction together? If you go fast, you're likely to go in the wrong direction and maybe even alone. One of the concepts in creating that connection, that collective DVFS, is this notion of converge, diverge. When you have a meeting, my invitation to you is when you converge and bring a group of people together in a meeting, that you use the DVFS to guide your agenda for the meeting. And second, which is really important, only do at that meeting what you can only do at that meeting. Do not read reports. Don't summarize a whole bunch of stuff that nobody wanted to read before they came. When you get together, a lot of resources, time, and energy is put into that moment. The last thing you want to do is use that time doing things that people could have done outside of the meeting. Only do in a meeting what you can only do in a meeting, and that is work on a problem. Give people pre-work. Give people some stuff to look and give them a question. Read this information. Here's the question. Come to this meeting ready to dive in to that question and get to work. Don't come to the meeting not prepared. That is the worst waste of time of everybody, and it's the worst waste of organizational resources that I've ever seen in my life. And everybody complains about meetings that are a waste of time, but everybody also complains. When I say everybody, it's like almost everybody. I've been there, so the reason I say everybody is because I think we all have been there, that we get something to do in advance, and I just didn't do it. And then I show up thinking I can fake it. And we really have an unproductive meeting. And then I blame the person in charge of the meeting for having a bad meeting. When they actually did all the right things, me, just created conditions for that person to not succeed and our project to be a waste of my time, our time, and us to go slow. I mean, to really have to redo, make up, fix, back up, all of that stuff doesn't need to happen. When you converge a group together, give them pre-work, things to come, give them a question and a task, and say, we're going to answer this and address this at the meeting. They come to the meeting. You then wrestle with it, figure out the solution, create some action plans, and diverge back out. Everybody goes to work. And in good project management, you have everybody doing their tasks. And then in good continuous improvement, people learning from their tasks, because when you converge back in, boom, it's the next level of what have we done? What have we learned? What are we going to do differently as we move from here? So Converge Diverge is a great way to help people to converge and discuss DVFS and move out into the F and move back into more F and move out into more S and move back into more S. So really using the Converge Diverge model is really key to creating that tipping point. It is that magic moment when an idea, trend, or social behavior crosses a threshold, tips, and spreads like wildfire. And it's only done through good collaborative engagement with people who are part of supporting and defending that which they help to create. And it becomes a better solution. So how do you engage? 3 levels. Think about it like this. You've got your top level leadership. You've got to make sure that they're engaged. You've got to make sure that they are involved in the project. You've got to make sure that they have input and that they've given you what are called clear lines, guidelines, and no lines. Think about it like that. And I got this from Jim Howden, who's got a great book out, and you'll look him up, and I love his work. He and I are friends, and he uses this when he works with leaders. You got to have firm lines. Firm lines, which means this is the way what we expect as leaders from this change. Guidelines, here are some areas to work within. And then no lines, here's some things to figure out. And they've got to work with a change team that is building the collaborative process in conjunction with that top leadership group. And those two groups got to work hand in hand as they begin to engage the rest of the organization, mid-level leadership. What I will tell you is mid-leadership, middle managers are the key to the success of any organization, any change. They are the linchpin to success. They've got to have their own DVFS in conjunction with the leader. So you're building that bigger DVFS, right? So you have leaders have their own DVFS. Then the mid-level leadership is engaged by top leaders with them involved, supporting them in creating their own DVFS, creating a new DVFS, a bigger one. And then you got to get out into the system, the whole organization, and start engaging the frontline people, the users of the change, the people working every day in a larger system-wide DVFS. When you get there, you create the tipping point, which means that you've engaged the right number of people, and the change, the pace of that change accelerates. You got to go slow to go fast. So now, let me give you an example. 180 days. Having a cookout and looking at 80 days around the world as a theme. And so you can think of 80 days around, let's just use that, the 80 days around the world. And this organization wanted to improve the number of resets for a main client that had computers, and their job in this organization was to ensure that the computers stayed up and running. Every time they had to be reset means that you had to restart things, and they had to have some help in getting their system back up and running. So 5 days, I got it running. 5 days later, it broke down. I got to get it up and running. 2 days, got to get it up and running. 7 days, got 7 days. It's broke now. 2 days. Oh God. 9. 24. Oh yeah, that's better. 60. 1 day. Yuck. 3 days. You got to be kidding me. They are really frustrated. This client was so frustrated they were about ready to cancel the contract, and it was the #1 contract for this unit. It was located in a small village, and if that unit, that department that was serving that client, lost the client, that whole department would be closed down. That village, which was getting most of its employment with that particular department, most people were employed there, they would lose, and the economic impact on that village would be huge. So they were needing to fix this and get this client's time to 80 days and above, even beyond that, to 180. So what happened was the top level leadership didn't want to do it, didn't believe that the employees could come up with a solution, were concerned about engaging them. They created a program where they said it's 80 days around the world. They made a banner, they made cookouts, they made all kinds of stuff. They put out flyers. It was all this one-to-many communication. They told everybody, get on board, get going with it. It didn't work. Did not work. They didn't agree that mid-level leaders could solve the problem with the frontline employees. Management was afraid and nervous. They believed people can't innovate. Management was out of options. A collaborative change consultant said, let's engage them. And they said, the leadership said, you got 2 hours and you can bring everybody in the room. They were able to bring about 100 out of 110 people into the room for 2 hours in that department to look at solving that problem. Here's the thing. They had to move into that ennobling vision, right? And they had to first get dissatisfaction, get a B, get an F, and get an S in place, right? So you can talk about, hey, I'm dissatisfied, but we also got to quickly shift to that V, an ennobling vision of what they yearn for. And the leadership said, this better work, 2 hours. Well, 2 hours later, in the middle of the 2 hours, the leaders had come in, they're watching to see if it's going to work because they're nervous. The main leader of that group was amazed, jumped up and said, hey, this is amazing. They formed an immediate implementation team, and they said, we're going to implement your ideas. You're coming up with the best ideas we've ever heard, and it worked. It went from 25 to 44 to 68 to 81 to towards 180 days and more. So they were excited. They had those implementation teams. They had inspired employees. People were talking about how they felt different, how they felt that the process engaged them in a way that this was really their change. They understood why, and they were a part of the process. If the D, the V, the F, the S was put in place during that 2-hour conversation where they talked about their D, the V, the F, and the S, and as you can see, they had dramatic results. So there are 3 questions. You have a meeting. I want you to answer 3 questions. You have a change initiative. You have any type of engagement. You're going to bring people together. What's the purpose of this meeting? At the end of this meeting, how are we going to be different? What will be different at the end? Who needs to be in the meeting in order for us to achieve that purpose? And what kind of conversation do we need to have? A working conversation, a working meeting that needs to be in place so that we can move forward on that purpose and actually think about the DVFS as being a guide to how you run that meeting, as a template. The meeting design sequence, this is really important. So what you want to do is a lot of times people have meetings and they have agenda items, no outcomes that they want to achieve, and no clear purpose for the meeting. So what I would invite you to do is try this. It's okay. A lot of times we are very action-oriented. And so go ahead and put your agenda down and then start asking the question. We do this item on the agenda in order to what? We do this item on the agenda in order to what? And as you start doing that, you'll start getting outcomes. And then what you do is you then say, okay, I got this list of outcomes. I got this agenda. Now I'm clear about the outcomes of what we're trying to achieve. Then say, if all these outcomes were achieved, what is going to be different overall for us at the end of this meeting? That's the overarching purpose statement. Sometimes one of those outcomes becomes the overarching purpose. The rest of the outcomes stay as the outcomes for the session. But it's good to have a purpose statement with some outcomes. Then you move into who needs to be here, and have that on your agenda. And then you have the agenda. And then that way people know the why of the agenda, the why people are there, they understand who needs to be there, and they can then see this purpose and outcomes. So, got a whole bunch of people you need to bring together. The who. Think about it in terms of biographical characteristics, meaning the typical stuff that's in an HR hiring form, such as gender, age, race, ethnicity, and orientation, and those kinds of things that are a valid part of what we try as we do the diversity, equity, and inclusion work that we do in our organizations. In addition, think about years of experience. Think about location in the organization. Think about where they work in the organization in terms of types of function, in finance and or delivery or sales or production or purchasing or HR or whatever it might be. Think about where they are. Front line. Think about those kinds of things as well. Really try to make sure you maximize the mix of perspectives that come to your meeting, come to your project, come to your event, so that you are really bringing that diversity in to maximize and leverage all that wisdom in a collaborative way to have a better result and people on the same page so that you can accelerate the implementation. So this idea of having people sit in groups is another principle. When people sit in groups in your meeting, if you have a meeting that has more than 8 people, you're going to probably want to, you have 10 people, 12 people, you probably want to have that meeting have moments where people pair up and work on something, come back and share. You can have groups of 3, groups of 4. It depends on the size of the meeting. But big meeting like this, you have small groups of, as you can see there, like 6 to 8 people. If you have a group of 10 people meeting, you might break up into 2 groups of 5 at times. Really try to maximize the ability for each person to have a voice and to have something to contribute and to work on the solution and then bring it to the whole. So individual has a voice. The group makes sense of it, then they bring it back to the whole. Google does a lot of research on what makes for great teams. And what differentiates great teams from good teams is the idea that each team makes sure that everybody has a voice and contributes to the overall DVFS solution that they create. So last, I want to talk about strategic planning as a canvas. And you can have a strategic plan for a team, you can have a strategic plan for a department, you can have a strategic plan for a whole organization. Now, What do you think about when you think about strategic planning? It can be complicated, it can be on a shelf, it can be over there, but it's not. Strategic planning has basically 5 elements. And if you create concisely on 1 page to 2 pages at the most, a document that has your mission, vision, principles, goals, and objectives, you now have your strategy, your strategic plan for whatever it is. I did research, looked at 300 plus strategic plans, content analyzed them, and found that there are these 5 concepts. You might call a mission, something to vision, aspiration. You might call principles, core values. You might call goals, targets. You might call objectives, measures. You might have different things that you call these things, but there's still 5 concepts that make up a strategy. I use the words mission, vision, principles, goals, and objectives. You can look at your strategic plan and ask yourself, which one of these fits for our label that we use? And then make sure you have these 5 concepts in your strategic plan. And it's a core value. So I just want to emphasize this. It's a core value, because once you do that, it's really the values. When you think of what are our core values, our culture, strategy actually describes it. So you can see here, you have your mission, vision, goals, and principles around the outside. Objectives tie it all together. They are where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. So mission is also called purpose, a credo, a calling. It's that important difference that you're going to make in the world. It's how people are different and better off because of a core thing you do well as an organization. Remember that mode, in transformation, how you deliver and what you do. This is what a mission gets at. It's that core thing you do and how people are different because of that core thing you do so well. The mission has that action and impact, the difference, and your talent, in short. So there's Quasi. He's a great guy, and he was really wrestling with something, and that was what to do with the rest of his life. I'm in Uganda, and I meet him, and I'm asked to talk to him, and I say, Quasi, tell me about a moment you mattered. And he said, well, it was this morning. I said, really? He goes, yeah, I was driving into the UN. He's a very talented man who was the chief of his tribe, king of his tribe, chief. And he left as the eldest son to make money in the capital. And he was good at mechanics, and he drove for the UN. And he was driving someone to the airport. And he said, I was driving, and there was a dog jumped out in front of me. I said, well, what happened? He goes, I didn't hit it. I thought, okay. Well, what was different in that moment? What happened? And he said, I saved its life. And I said, so, Quasi, you save lives. He goes, I do. I said, well, tell me how you save lives. Well, I'm in the capital. Lots of kids don't have all my tribe my village calls me for advice on water and cattle and school. Kids, I help them find shelter and places to live. The homeless kids in our city. And I said, so what are you doing? He goes, I'm sharing my life. And I said, so Quasi, you save lives through sharing your life. And he said, yes, in a very low voice, yes. I said, say that. He goes, I can't. I go, just try. It's your words, right? He goes, yes, I said that. But he took a deep breath. I said, say it. He goes, I save lives through sharing my life. I said, try a little bit louder. I save lives through sharing my life. And he began to cry. And here's the thing. In that moment, he connected with that ennobling vision of what matters to him. He connected with what really matters at its deepest of levels. His mission. And he saves lives, that difference, through his talent of sharing his life. And he paused and he said, Steve, after you calmed down, you all were crying actually, and he calmed down and he said, Steve, he goes, I teach my children to not deny who they are. I teach my children to not deny who they are. I know what I must do now. So the vision is the next concept. So you got a mission, you know what your talent and the difference you make in the world. Then really it's about how big and best do you want to be in the world? And what kind of world do you see? When you take that mission out in the world, do you want to be the best, the champion, the number one? And what kind of world is excuse me, what kind of world do you see out there? And then you got objectives. Think about it like this. You got this world you see, you got these other things, and now you got these objectives. So what are two ways you can achieve your objectives? You got finite and infinite. You got finite, which are tasks you complete. You check them off. Infinite are measures, like you measuring your trends, like the number of units sold to number of people served, or those kinds of things. You track it over time. Finite is build a building, complete a project of some kind. And so what's interesting is that doesn't matter unless you tie that. You got to tie these objectives to your vision and mission. Well, what helps tying you to those is goals and principles, because you need to have a set of principles. And how are you going to treat people when you do change? How are you going to interact with others? And what are these goals, these end states that you want to achieve? Because every goal should have an objective, some type of project or measure that's attached to it. And you have the goals with these objectives. You have these principles, which says this is how we treat each other. This is how we treat our work. All of that tied back into your mission and vision. So my key advice to you is this. When you create your strategy document, keep it really simple. One sentence for your mission, one sentence for your vision, one sentence for each of your goals and your principles, and then build out some clear objectives, finite and infinite. And build them out, put it into a two-page document, and you can have your objectives be a third page if you need. Set it and keep it really, really simple, and make sure you have labels for each of your goals. And make sure you have labels for each of your principles. So it's very clear, this goal, this goal, this goal. Label things, clear definitions, keep it simple. That is the key to your success in translating a strategy document into an actionable way of moving forward. Conagra Foods is another great example. And in this organization, when they got together with their leadership, and they asked their leadership, and this is the last piece of advice, what does it mean to be a breakthrough organization? And there's this concept they called One Conagra. And the leader sat there in a collaborative environment, engaged with them, brought them together, and used the DVFS, used the individual group whole discussion, used a real clear connection. They did their own DVFS work. They worked with their leadership mid-managers, and now they engaged everybody. They're sitting with them, and one person came up and said, hey, what does One Conagra mean? Do you have an agreement on what it means? They looked at each other, and they said, the CEO said, no, we don't. And the room applauded. They applauded the honesty. They applauded the leaders not being perfect. You do not have to be a perfect leader. You don't have to have all the answers. It's important that you are coming in asking for help and to be work in collaboration. Collaboration is based on the principle that I believe we are all wise. You're wise. I need us to be together in order to make this happen. My encouragement to you is to remember to always respect the wisdom in the room. Because if you want to go fast, you can go alone. But if you trust that wisdom and you want to go far, you can go together. So, super grateful to have shared this with you. I look forward to more conversations with anybody who wants to talk with me about this. You know how to find me. Bye for now.